This week's episode of the ArtTactic Podcast is sponsored by ArtBase. Are you managing an art collection, an artist studio, or a gallery? Is it time to bring your collection management skills up to a professional level? We think so. Well, ArtBase is the right software to manage your art business. ArtBase allows you to track your artworks and contacts in an easy-to-use, powerful database. You just enter your data once and use that data to generate reports, offers, contracts, and much more. They've got a brand new version out with a whole new look that can be used on the cloud from any location on any device. So what are you waiting for? Go to artbase.com now to learn more and be sure to mention ArtTactic for a 15% discount. Over the past 12 years, the ArtTactic Podcast has grown to be a leading art market podcast. Each week we share an exclusive in-depth interview with a key art world insider. As we move into a new phase of programming, we want our broadcast to be listener-supported and create content that you want to hear, not what we think you want to hear. You can support us by visiting contribute.to/arttactic. Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. It's Armory Week in New York City. It's great to have this week back in the art world calendar after missing it last year due to the pandemic. We have the Armory Show, the Independent Art Fair, and speaking of which, make sure to check out last week's episode with Katie Aquaro from the Independent in case you missed it. It was fantastic. And we also have an extraordinary number of excellent gallery shows opening this week. It's a jam-packed week of art events, and anyone who's coming into town, please let me know. It'd be great to see you there. In this week's episode, we chat with a gallery who will be exhibiting at the Armory this week. We speak with Davida Nemeroff, owner of Night Gallery, and William Hathaway, partner and sales director at Night Gallery. Davida and William speak with us about a variety of fascinating topics relating to the art world, and they offer incredible insights into running a very successful gallery in LA. So we hope you enjoyed the episode, and thanks so much for listening. Davida and William, thanks so much for chatting with us.
Yeah, thanks.
So welcome. Yeah, we're happy to be here.
So I think we should start with some really exciting news that I just learned, actually. You're opening a new, larger gallery space in November in LA. We'd love to hear more about the new space and also what are some of the major factors that went into your thought process when deciding on moving forward with an expansion like this, especially considering the pandemic and just what we've been through the last 18 months.
Yeah, well, we have been kind of talking about doing some sort of additional space for a few years now. And this is definitely like an additional space. We're not moving from our current location. So yeah, it's definitely an expansion. And we hadn't found the right kind of space I sort of always knew that it had to be near our current location as opposed to having like a pop-up somewhere else in the city or in another city, just from a logistical standpoint of like what our operations are like and our staff and everything like that. And then the opportunity came up that this large warehouse building next door to us became available. And all it needed was a lot of TLC and some vision. And we rented it and have been working on it since April. And it's about twice the footprint of our current location. So it's 14,000 square feet. And it's a beautiful, very rare, downtown LA warehouse building, kind of reminiscent of old New York, or even Europe. A European Kunsthaus type building, large windows and a beautiful double bow truss ceiling that's in.
Excellent.
For everything else, the condition of the building, the ceiling was actually in very good shape. So if you just keep your eyes up.
Keep looking up.
It's good. But I guess during the pandemic, we realized how much back of house operations were critical to the success of the business and how much space we really need, not necessarily for exhibitions, but also for photography, storage. The amount of work that goes in and out of the gallery is pretty pretty substantial and oftentimes surprising to to us even,
Yeah.
and our staff. And so just having extra space is, I think, going to be pivotal in our growth. And also having close proximity to that extra space without having to divide the staff in such a crucial way. Like, for example, having one staff here and one staff in like West Hollywood, I think would be much harder. Whereas here we can float sort of effortlessly between the two buildings. And ultimately here at our current location, we're sort of like just, bumping into each other all the time. We have sort of outgrown the space. And most importantly, I think the artists are really excited about having a new additional exhibition space to work with. So some of the artists have done like 2 or 3 solo shows at this space. And I think giving them something new to work with is always exciting.
I think that one of the key points too is just, as the staff, as we are growing, the staff is getting bigger. And, as it currently stands, we had a desk that we all sit around. We have a desk we all sit around, and initially big enough for 4 people or 5 people, and we added a top on, added to it so that we could then fit 7 people around one table. And I think now, it's going to be nice to have the extra space to work.
Yeah, when we built this space, we didn't really have the knowledge of the operations of a gallery, right? It was really kind of concentrated on the exhibition space, very little on storage, very little on staff. And now it's kind of the opposite. You need to have a lot for storage and a lot for staff. And, of course, substantial exhibition spaces, but the larger the exhibition spaces, the more demanding that is on the artist. And sometimes it's like too demanding. You can't really make spontaneous moves if someone is expected to make 15 large paintings, So it's nice to have actually smaller exhibition spaces that we can introduce new artists, continue showing, of course, our beloved artists, and of course putting together back of house presentations as well as storage.
Yeah, the new space is going to have an additional 1,000 square foot space that can be both for exhibitions or for private viewings. We already had a couple of private viewings in there this summer, and it went really well. And so it's exciting to have just that more space to have those private conversations.
Yeah, that's all really interesting. And as you said, there's a lot more that goes into a gallery space than the exhibition area. There's many different facets that need to be considered. I feel like the new space is an investment in the city of Los Angeles. I've always had an enjoyable experience when I go to LA for an art trip, whether it's Freeze LA or just going to gallery and museum shows and seeing collectors and artists. It feels like the art scene in LA has really taken off in the last few years. Of course, visiting a city is very different than living in a city. What would you say are some of the ways LA has changed, even in the past few years, when it comes to the LA art scene?
Well, I just wanted to mention that this is definitely an investment in our area of Los Angeles, which is very specific, and sort of different than the rest of the city, downtown Los Angeles. We have been lucky enough to have a number of other galleries come and join us in this neighborhood. However, it is not necessarily walking friendly. There isn't
a coffee shop.
Yeah, it's a little rough around the edges, but it's still a very important and magical part of Los Angeles. And I think in terms of the scene here, it's kind of, it's certainly bubbling out of control, or maybe not bubbling out of control, but certainly very robust. And there's a lot of galleries that are opening up satellite spaces or pop-up spaces and things like that. And I think overall that's good. I would say that's probably good for the general market here, but it doesn't necessarily impact what our goals are and what our how we see our gallery and its relationship to Los Angeles. Like ours is not a superficial one. It's like very much rooted in LA, and us taking on these kind of larger spaces and dedicating resources to the infrastructure of the space rather than just like a veneer gallery space is just part of actually our attempt to have a global reach versus a local reach, you know? Like we're very much an LA gallery. We show a lot of Los Angeles-based artists, many of whom who actually just recently moved to Los Angeles to be closer to the gallery so that we as collaborators can better serve each other. I just think that we don't really have a very, I feel like we have a much larger reach than the local scene. When it comes to collectors, I feel like we are very tapped into the local artist scene here. And yeah, I don't know, like, does that seem, like I would say we do like certainly like most of our business outside of Los Angeles.
Yeah. I think, you know, kind of touching on just how it's changed, I do think that for years, all the artists were here. You know, you had the artists and then you had a few galleries. And really the key to surviving or doing well in LA was really being a part of the community. You know, the LA collectors weren't going to buy from galleries who just moved into town and were, you know, New York galleries ready to capitalize on the collectors here. A lot of those collectors went to New York to buy art. So, and then they only really bought from the local galleries that they were close with or that they'd been supporting from the beginning. And I think that's changed now. I think a lot of collectors are coming to LA to buy art. And I think that's, you know, for us, as Davida's saying, has been very great because now we have people coming in from New York to buy. We don't have to necessarily go to New York to buy, to sell, or to, you know, London or, you know, the fairs are obviously very important because you do meet new people, but certainly with Freeze kind of expanding, there is this kind of new energy around Los Angeles in terms of coming here and buying and participating in what the local galleries are doing. I think people are starting to see that because the artists are here, you know, some of the best work is here, and the younger galleries that are showing those artists are getting a lot more exposure. So I think it's really exciting to see as somebody who started in, you know, I guess 2006 or 2005. I really felt like there was a great energy even back then, and there was kind of something to really be excited about. And so I certainly feel validated in my decision to kind of choose LA over New York.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think with the great museums, the increasing number of artists moving to LA, more and more galleries opening, there's so much to do in LA right now. I actually have FOMO every time I come because I know I just won't be able to do everything I want to do because there's only so much time and you're constrained to an extent, right, by how spread out the city is.
And I think Uber obviously was a really big part of that, as it allowed people to come. And I mean, it's frustrating now because it's, you know, so difficult, but the ride shares really have, I actually think, made a huge difference to the gallery world because now having galleries separating, you know, in different neighborhoods of the city it's less of an issue. So it's kind of wild to think about that, but I think galleries owe a lot to ride shares.
Wow, that's a great point. I often think about the ways in which different technologies have impacted the art world, but I never considered Uber, but that's a great point. So we had a few galleries on the podcast early on during the pandemic, and we understood how it was impacting them. Now that we're about a year and a half into it, and, you know, we've been through a lot of ups and downs, and hopefully we continue to head towards the end of this thing. But if we look back at the height of the pandemic, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges of that experience? And on a more positive note, do you feel it helped you and the industry evolve in any meaningful ways?
Certainly for me, being a parent of a kindergartner and a second grader, also a sales director of a gallery during the pandemic, and all the other things that happened, it was incredibly challenging to be be a teacher, to be a father, and obviously helping keep the gallery moving forward. So I think there were a lot of challenges early on. I think we had such a good team that we were able to kind of stay close and talk, on Zooms every week and a couple times a week. And we also had, artists still making great work. But it was certainly really challenging. And I think the thing that I think you always hear is that it slowed down. And, conversations that I wasn't able to have with collectors, I was now able to have. So, people were open to discovery. They were open to having conversations, talking about artists maybe that, I really loved, and they hadn't really had the time to kind of, dig deeper into their work or look at a lot of different images. So I thought that aspect of it was really wonderful because I started to connect with collectors on another level. And also we were all going through the same thing. So, a collector that, didn't really ever hear about their children, and now, we're talking about kids. And I think the relationships became a little bit stronger, and, just feeling more connected to the community was helpful.
Yeah, it showed a little bit more humanity.
Yeah.
Which I think the art world can always use.
Of course.
And then in terms of a business perspective, I think that the art world was very well situated to handle a pivot to online kind of.
It's like
online exhibitions, online purchasing. Like, we were so well equipped for that. Platforms that had existed prior to the pandemic that had cemented the legitimacy of buying work online. Definitely gave collectors a lot of confidence, and artists trusting their galleries, and just like long-term relationships, being able to thrive in the pandemic. I mean, without a doubt, the early days of the pandemic were
terrifying.
Some of the most terrifying, experiences, like not knowing what the future was going to be like. And then, we sort of just continued to program, to have exhibitions, to, photography is such a huge part.
We had an in-house photographer, which was, you could just kind of get things.
We had the gift of all gifts was having an in-house photographer who was also our head prep. So we were very well situated, and he was like incredibly hardworking and generous with his time, and enabled us to thrive during the pandemic. And then, of course, you're not, from an expense perspective, you weren't spending money on art fairs or travel or these kinds of things. So you were able actually to turn it around and sort of normalize the growth at the same time, We'll see how it is going forward now as art fairs return, and, more galleries are, it seems like galleries keep opening and opening and opening, but, that's part of like the challenge and drive of running a gallery.
I do also, that's a good point about the fairs. Like it puts the emphasis back on exhibitions too, which I think is something we've missed. Art fairs used to be things that artists didn't want to participate in. They didn't give new work. It wasn't cool. And this is obviously 10 years ago. Recent years, it's always all the newest work, and I just want to wait to see what you have for the fair. And I really think, just reminding collectors and the world that exhibitions is really where the best work is, where you get to see an artist who's really put in all their effort and their time into something, and, giving birth to an idea, to an exhibition is the reason why we do this job. It's one of the best parts for me, working, is having, all the images done, the exhibition set up, lighting, everything just looks amazing. And that's kind of the most exciting part of, I think, working at a gallery, is that day that first day after an opening where everything is set, is really exciting. And I think that was kind of nice to really put the emphasis back on exhibitions and the focus on the artists that were being shown at that time.
And another thing is that I think the pandemic did make us sort of pivot into doing complimentary online viewing rooms for our exhibitions, so that people who are not here in person are able to get a better sense of the exhibition, like in a virtual sense. I do think that there's more dimension on those online viewing rooms than there had previously been on the website, for example. However, I think that like the online viewing rooms for art fairs maybe like aren't going to last or stay relevant. You know, there was a few really great ones at the beginning, but it just seems like the way in which like the art fairs try to implement a kind of VIP status and I don't know, like they try and do that. They try and like pace it out, and it ultimately ends up, I think, being really confusing and sort of like and
less effective.
Yeah, less effective, and
the magic is being at the fair, seeing the work.
Absolutely.
I mean, kind of,
the magic is definitely the work. You know, that's one thing that we have that we always come back to. Like, even though we can sell work online, the magic is the work. You know, and it's our job to convey the magic through conversations, through images, through online viewing rooms, through writing, through text, to the collector. And then, of course, like we are like all super satisfied when the collector receives the work and feels similarly to us.
Yeah. I also just want to note, sorry, Adam, that it is incredibly challenging, and I don't, you know, what the staff has to go through to get these online viewing rooms together is an immense amount of work. And so I just want everybody who sees them to know that there is so much work that goes into them, and you know, everybody should be applauded for just how much effort and work goes into them.
I appreciate what both of you said. They're really insightful reflections on the past year and a half, and I think you're right in that the pandemic, it really brought the art community together in a lot of ways. And I remember galleries reopening last September. Gosh, that was a year ago now. And honestly, just walking in and showing up, being someone who took in an exhibition, all that hard work by the artist and the gallery to put it on, you felt like you were making a difference just by showing up. And when it comes to the art fairs, I think it's all about developing existing relationships and building new relationships. And it was tough going so long without seeing people in this community, but I'm hopeful that this week at the Armory and the Independent, it'll feel as close to normal as it's been since the pandemic, and hopefully people come away feeling good about the experience.
Yeah, and I think like if we're wearing masks and stuff, it'll be okay. We'll still be able to, like, you know, I feel like we've become accustomed to like having real social experiences while masked. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, of course, it's like not wear a mask, but like you can still have a meaningful conversation with somebody and a meaningful interaction with somebody, and you know, obviously protect yourself and others while wearing a mask.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to ask you a question really focused on the art market. I feel like we get a pulse of where things are in the market by seeing auction results, but that's, of course, just one part of the art world. I wanted to ask you, how are things going at the gallery? Is it very active at the moment? How does it compare to earlier during the pandemic and even before it?
Well, I guess like Night Gallery has been on a growth trajectory for the last 10, 11 years since it opened. And I think that if you look at that graph now, you would see a continuation of growth, which I think like has to do with all of the work we've done before the pandemic, as well as work we did during the pandemic, as well as Night Gallery cementing itself as a brand that not only like introduces new talent, but also continues to foster and support artists who are thriving right now. We happen to like work with like an incredible group of artists, many of whom are just like taking off. I mean, they were taking off before the pandemic, they're taking off now. And I think us as a gallery have we're able to collaborate with some of the like bigger galleries that they're working with too. So that's also really a great working experience. I think we're able to show up, deliver, produce, sell, collaborate. Like we can kind of, we can be there, you know, we can compete. And also do it in a way that's, I always kind of like try and perpetuate a like kind of take the higher road. Let's, you know, like
long term,
big picture, friendly, supportive, nurturing. You know, these kind of like morals that the gallery has, or you know, like we don't have a plaque or anything.
We're not trying to get in fights. You know, we're really just trying to really like propel the artists forward, and you know, work with artists that want to work with us, and work with galleries that want to collaborate. And I think you go in with kind of a positive outlook and, you know, the best intentions. You tend to find galleries to work with that have a similar kind of idea, which is, you know, makes everything easier, you know, when you get along with the gallery that you're sharing an artist with.
And that there's always the potential for, you know, a silver lining or a learning lesson, or, you know, even if that lesson is don't work with those people. But overall, like, you know, to have maintain a certain kind of like professionalism and positive attitude that I think like does produce like better results.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not about like, it's about bringing more people to the table and and trying to like surprise ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that getting to kind of into your market question, I think, you know, we've just been able to bring more people to the gallery with these new relationships and with the growth of the gallery, so that you know, we've been able to, like, I guess no one gets priced out. You know, I think that everybody kind of, there's
some people do.
Well some, but there's for collectors, but the collectors that have been with us for a long time.
Have to bring new artists,
you know. So it's like I just feel like we are very much a gallery where, you know, however the market is going, we kind of I think fit in nicely with where it is. Like when I first started working here, you know, nobody was really buying figuration, and Night Gallery was only showing figuration, really. And as it's grown, figuration has become such an important part of the market, and you know, we've started to add more abstract artists, and it seems like abstraction is, you know, coming back into style, or, you know, there's some, you know, more emphasis on it, and you know, the gallery's obviously always been very diverse, and so, you know, I think just the idea of what Night Gallery is and brings to the art world is something that's very fits in nicely.
Well, to William's point, it's kind of interesting because like I feel like Night Gallery is often dubbed as a kind of trend-setting gallery or something. That's like a constant like tagline for the gallery, and I think that may be true. But when the trend becomes so powerful, I do think that somehow we've moved on. Like, you know, like I don't necessarily see Night Gallery as like a trendy gallery. I do see the artists here being like forefronters of their generation and their conversation. And I think there's kind of a difference between those two things. Let's say that like we have maintained a lot of collectors, and we've also like met a lot of new collectors during the pandemic. And a lot of that is through these conversations, right? Like people having more time, as William said, and William and Brian spending more time on the phone with collectors. And also the gallery being a destination place to visit.
I know many people, myself included, believe you've done a great job identifying talented artists. when they're really young or just starting off, and then you end up working with them at the gallery. It's amazing to see how some artist practices evolve so much in just a few years out of school. A lot of artists listen to this podcast. Can you share some advice for artists who are maybe just finishing school and are trying to find their aesthetic and their voice in their practice and really trying to take their art to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I do this often. But been invited, I feel like that's sort of where I shine, is actually like with artists, and especially like in artists who are starting out, and I have said this for years, and I really believe this, and I've seen it kind of work for other artists. Is really like, and this was actually told to me like when I graduated from Columbia MFA program in 2009, with so many of artists that I actually continue to work with. Jerry Saltz gave our speech, and he said, like, look around the room. These are your peers. These are the people you're going to work with. And I really took that to heart, and I continue to work with so many of those artists, even artists that I haven't even worked with yet, but that I went to school with, whose work I'm thinking about, who I'm in a better position now to like produce something larger. It's just kind of really interesting. So I would say to those artists that like, your peer group is super important, and can be the engine that propels you forward, like the conversation, the context, possibly even like the gallery space or the artist room space, where you get to exercise these ideas before showing up to a big gallery and demanding a show, I really believe in that. And then the other is just to continue working. It is really, really challenging. And if you're interested in a gallery's program, I think like showing up, and if you can't show up, be present online and continue to like develop a relationship with that gallery. And I swear over time, it works. Like you can break me down.
Amazing.
And it's just like, if you're really, really interested and really, really enthusiastic about a gallery's program, well, that's like the greatest compliment ever. If you show up to a gallery and just expect the gallery to look at your work, but you don't know any of the artists that the gallery shows, or you haven't been to their gallery space, and you don't understand how really hard it is to run a gallery and what a huge sacrifice it is on one's like life, then I would say adieu. I really can't connect with people like that. But I actually work with a number of artists who, I met through coming to the gallery, over and over for years, and then eventually, like, maybe they invited me a few times, and I went over, and relationships start getting built, and conversations start happening, and yeah, that is a big way how it works.
And meeting multiple people at the gallery too, I think is, I know that for me personally, like I've done studio visits with artists and have said, I think you need to keep working. And, but then, somebody else at the gallery meets them, and a couple of years later, their work, is better. And then a studio visit comes through another channel. But I think what Davida's right, it's just making work. You need to keep making work and being positive and trying to connect with the people at the galleries that you really can, aspire to be a part of.
But also your peer group, back to your peer group. Like, yeah. I do think like Night Gallery started as like a post-studio practice, post-grad school practice, and was really a way for like us as graduates to stay connected. And then of course it evolved, and now it's something different. But when it started, it was definitely like, was the late night conversations in the studio transformed into a space dedicated for exhibitions at night.
And thus the name Night Gallery. I think that's great advice. And I think with something like social media, specifically Instagram, it's a great platform, and it makes it even easier to make these connections and sustain connections with your peers. And so as an artist, if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, you can be really proactive there and develop a lot of new relationships and really just put yourself out there. And, the more people you meet, the more connections you have, the more potential opportunities you'll have in the future. That really isn't a rule necessarily just for artists. It's for anyone in life, no matter what industry you're in. But I think it's definitely applicable for artists.
I definitely think Instagram is a hugely powerful tool. I've seen work on Instagram that I've followed up on. I've met I think during the pandemic, that was the number one way I met new artists. Danielle McKinney, Tanya Monsell, this new artist, Marina Kim, are all artists whose work I first saw on Instagram and then have since obviously developed proper in-person relationships with. But it's definitely through the addiction of scrolling, which, I'm also upset about, that you have to constantly be hunting. You have to be constantly looking, constantly sourcing, by the time someone,
well, I think that's why I was saying, it's always good to know somebody else at the gallery other than just the owner or the partner, the principal, because, everybody has a voice, certainly here at this gallery, and we're always, sitting around a big table and mentioning artists and things come up. So, it's valuable to just stay connected.
Definitely. Davida and William, we really appreciate you coming onto the podcast and chatting with us about so many fascinating topics. We really value your insights. And before we let you go, we would love it if you can just tell us about some of the exhibitions you have planned coming up this fall.
Yeah, of course. Well, here at Night Gallery South, which is what we're dubbing our current location, we're going to open up our season with two really exciting shows, Awal Arizku and Susan Chen. And then at our new space, which we're calling Night Gallery North, Samara Golden is going to do a new installation to inaugurate the space, and that will open probably in November. And another thing about that space is that the shows they will last longer. They will be sort of bigger productions. They will be, so they won't be on the same schedule. And of course, in the other exhibition space at Night Gallery North, Brantley Lucero will be presenting a brand new installation as well. And then we have, AWAD. We have Canadian artist Darby Milbrass who's going to be doing a show with us, her first show in the U.S. Anne Libby, Paul Heyer, Elizabeth Yeager, Freeze London, Armory, Three Boots, Dallas.
I love it.
And I'm having a big so, we have our hands full, to say the least.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a really busy fall. Well, congrats again on the new space, and we really appreciate you joining us. If our listeners want to learn more about the gallery and the programming, what's the best website for them to visit?
It's nightgallery.ca.
Perfect. Davida and William, thanks so much again.
Thank you, Adam. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Adam.
it. Yeah.
See you soon.
See you in New York.
Definitely. See you soon. We want to thank ArtBase for sponsoring this week's episode of the ArtTactic Podcast. Are you managing an art collection, an artist, studio, or gallery? Is it time to bring your collection management skills up to a professional level? Well, ArtBase is the right software to manage your art business. ArtBase allows you to track your artworks and contacts in an easy-to-use, powerful database. All you do is enter your data once, and you use that data to generate reports, offers, contracts, and a bunch more. They've got a brand new version out with a whole new look that can be used in the cloud from any location on any device. So go to artbase.com now to learn more, and be sure to mention ArtTactic for a 15% discount.